Okay, let's see. Where was I? It's gotten a lot darker in a few minutes and a lot windier, so hopefully I can do this without too much interference. Anyway, let's see. I think I have enough room for a hunting size point. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to try to minimize the use of indirect percussion on this one. Just so I can preserve the tool. So I don't wear it out too soon. Otherwise, I would try to use indirect for this whole thing. And I probably should be using a hammerstone too, instead of my good billet. Well, that's not going to work. I think I was trying to rush it there. Let's see. I don't know. I'll need to watch the video again, but I might have had an incipient crack or a partial crack in there, because it's got an odd kind of fracture to it. Yeah, something happened there. Let's see. Let's try hammerstone. I'm using it like this, striking it like this. I'm trying to get an angle on here so I can strike it the other way and get rid of the square edge. Now, I'm not sure, but I don't think too many guys get into how they use their hammerstones in the videos that they make. You might think that it's the same striking technique every single time, but it's variable. You can adjust the angle, not only the stone this way, but also twisting it. You try to get in there and hit a weak spot and remove a flake. Or if it's not releasing in one angle, you can try to change that angle that way, or change it this way to peel off the flake, or flip the workpiece over and hit the other way. And again, I've got my arms resting on my legs. Not sure if I mentioned that either. They're resting right on the top of my legs, so that I strike the same every time. As far as distance, I can move it around like this quite a bit, but still be relatively in the same spot. It makes judging the strikes a lot easier. And I've got to whittle this down into kind of an oval shape. And it's so much easier with punch work or indirect percussion. But when I have a limited amount of material, I don't want to waste it. I can get these for free, but all my Antler I have to pay for. I changed it also now to strike this way, so I can strike this way, that way, and this way. I mean, there's many different ways to use a hammerstone. And I guess there's a lot of different ways to, well, maybe not a lot, but there are different ways to prepare the edges to strike with a hammerstone. But you know, if you've watched my videos, I'm not really concerned about preparing edges for each strike. I'm very opportunistic. So if it looks right, I'll hit it. If it doesn't look right, I'll flip it around, or I'll hit a different area. Like what I'm doing now, the easiest way for me to do this is just kind of haphazardly remove flakes and kind of create that bevel wherever I can. See, once I got a good rhythm going, I can continue it pretty much by just, you know, alternate flaking. Sometimes to get that started, you know, I just kind of haphazardly strike the stone and see where it takes me until I can finally get a good, you know, good rhythm going for the alternate flaking. Now with direct percussion like this, it's very difficult to conserve material. So I think that's a little bit too narrow for me to continue with a direct percussion on that side. Let me get rid of this area sticking out here, and then I'll do the rest around the outside with indirect. That way I don't risk breaking this like I did the other one. And then I'll switch back to direct and pressure. And limiting the indirect percussion also helps some of you guys that are not into punch work or indirect percussion, and that you do mainly direct percussion and pressure, and maybe you're struggling on the tile, not sure how to approach it with direct percussion and pressure flaking. Now this stuff pressure flakes fairly well. You can actually do the whole thing with pressure. If you got a large enough pressure flaker and your endurance is up there, it's, you know, you obviously would have more endurance than I do. I can't do the entire thing starting from this with pressure. I'd be worn out after about 5 minutes. But let's see. Some of you guys can really hang in there and do a lot of pressure. Not me. Okay, let's see. So I'm just going to try to zigzag this edge with indirect so I don't break it. I'm hitting in the same exact spots as I would with the hammerstone or the billet, except I'm a lot more precise and there's a lot less chance of hitting too high or hitting too hard. I'm using Antler for the mallet, Antler for the percussion tool, or the flaker, or the punch. So guys might use stones on the Antler. It works okay. It's just a little more awkward for me anyway, and it fatigues my wrist. So it's much easier to get the velocity going on this end without too much struggle. When you have a long mallet like this, this end goes a lot faster than this end when you're swinging it. I hit it right about here. I hold it down here, so it's a lot different than using a hammerstone and hitting it right about here. You know, hitting the mallet close to your fingers. In order to achieve the right velocity, it's a lot more effort, I think, with a hammerstone on the punch. So what I did there is that edge was a little bit too strong, so I backed up and tried to weaken it by taking another flake further away, and it did weaken the edge enough for me to start taking flakes off, because the edge has to be pretty weak in order to drive off these flakes in alternate pattern. See, that stalls out really fast on tile. It'll crush. So I can just back up and hit a flake further up, and it weakens this edge enough for me to hopefully get in there and get some more flakes. Again, I'm crushing it, so I'm going to back off that side and do this side. Maybe put a little more force in these strikes. Also, as I'm nearing the middle, I'm hesitating to hit really hard, because that's when it can break. So when you hesitate, you tend to crush the edge. And it crushes because you're not getting that full strike all the way through. It's just kind of bouncing off. Yeah, I've got plenty of room, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to back all the way off to the tip here, and then, you know, take some off the tip and start to redo the alternate flaking. To make another go at it, because it's pretty well stalled on both sides, and I could use a lot more force and try to get that flat spot off, but I'd rather weaken these edges like I just did there, and then, you know, try it again by losing some off the tip. Yeah, so that weakened it enough that I could get in there and remove a flake. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm using a good amount of force so I don't stall it or crush it. Okay. And if you're doing punch work and you're getting a lot of kicking, if you feel a lot of kicking on this hand, you're not doing it right. You should barely feel the strikes on this piece. If you're getting a lot of kickback or a lot of movement, you're not doing it right. Even with a lot of force, you shouldn't be feeling it. You'll feel the flakes hit your fingertip, and you'll have a lot of strikes against your fingers and maybe some cuts. You know, the faster and the harder you hit, but you shouldn't be getting a lot of this kind of motion, a lot of reaction to it, a lot of recoil. You should be getting minimal recoil. I just crushed the edge on that because I wasn't paying attention. What I should have done is gone a little bit higher, a little bit, you know, try to take a little bigger chunk out instead of just barely hitting the edge. With copper, you can kind of get away with hitting the edge very minimally, but with Antler, you've got to have a good bite on it, a good amount of Antler making contact. Okay, so it's stalled on both sides again. I'm going to come in here and rework this alternate flaking here so I can try to get past that. So I lose some width. But I'm being a little more aggressive. And you see how this edge is weakened, where it's thinner? And I can get on top of that weak edge and then drive a flake. It sort of worked, but now I've got this edge is much stronger. Let's see if I can get through that. See, the object is to remove most of this down below, but if I still have a lot left over, it's going to be more difficult the next time I strike. Yeah. Let's see if I can get in there with a hammerstone and get that off. See, I hit that just right, but it still didn't go. And that's because it's crushed and it's got a large amount of mass there. So maybe that'll help to weaken it there. I just kind of brushed along the edge and took some off. Now let's see if this will work again. Yeah, took a little flake off, but now I've got some strange cracking in there, probably from the hammerstone. But it shouldn't matter, it's pretty wide. It's still wide yet, so any weird cracking going on is not going to be on the finished point. And again, I'm hesitating to hit, so it's stalling and crushing. Okay, so let me go back and take care of that spot. And I think in one of my previous videos also I mentioned I need to be more aggressive in the initial stages to get it thinned out earlier. So let's see if I can get that off with just regular direct percussion. I'll use one of my other smaller pointed billets. This is moose also, I think. Yeah. So I'm just going to use it like this. Basically the same thing as my indirect strikes, same area, just using a direct percussion. It's a little more difficult, of course, but produces the same kind of results. Just hold it there with my finger near the tip. hit my finger. I think a tool just grazed my finger on, so I got to be careful. Sometimes it can drive, it can hold a little piece of stone in there and drive it into your finger. That's no fun. So now that the whole edge is kind of weak, it's very easy to remove flakes. And this is just downward strikes to trim it, because that area is sticking out a little too much. So I'm just going to trim it. It's good to have a little bit of extra width sometimes, so you can have some room to work with to create a platform and then dry flakes. But most of my technique is opportunistic, so I don't really plan on having much material to create platforms on. Now this is almost like I hold my hammerstone. Let's see if I can describe this. Let's say, with a hammerstone, sometimes when I strike, I hit like this, and it's kind of wobbly. Although I do support it all the way down, it tends to go like this, which is a little more softer strike than to use all the mass behind the strike, like for instance like this. Same with the billet. Sometimes I hold it so that this is not in the palm of my hand driving inward. It's kind of, a little bit looser, and it pivots a little bit more, a little bit of a softer strike. So that's what I was doing to trim. Like what I'm doing now, it's a softer type of strike. So I vary the grip on the billet quite a bit. It's not the same every time. And it's hard to see that on film. It's much easier to not cover what happens with the tool when you've got a punch that's just, gripped under my knee. It's in the same position every single time, and I'm striking it pretty much the same every time, although there is a little bit of variation in the strikes. There's no real comparison between that and using a direct percussion tool, where the way you hold it can vary a lot. Sometimes it's the same every time, but once in a while, if you find you're not striking in a way that works, you try a different position, and it's very fluid. The way you use it is very fluid. So I've got to figure out a way to show you guys how that looks without being too far away or too close. I'm going to try filming a little further away and try to explain the different fluid aspects of using a billet like this or a hammerstone like this. I like using, for precise work, a stone that's got like a pointed end on it. In other videos I use a rounded one. I like using these rounded hammerstones. I don't have to think about it when I use these. I just hit haphazardly. But when I want to do precise work, when I'm working a slab like this, it has to be very precise, or it can be broken easily. I tend to use more of a pointed tool. So I need to figure out a way to show you guys that technique a little more clearly than just this view here. So anyway, I'm getting pretty close to the oval shape that I want. It's almost 30 minutes, so I'm going to cut this off here and continue on the next video.